Okay, I think we have a really great turnout tonight, but I know people will be coming in. Um, Welcome, everyone. My name is Bruce Davis. I'm your host and facilitator for this evening's session. I'm part of a consulting team hired by the City of Toronto to assist with community engagement for this particular shelter project. I'm joined tonight by my colleague Yasmin Youssef, who's going to be helping with some of the technical things behind the scenes and also helping with the Q&A session that we have. And I'd also like to thank in advance Daniel Johnson from the city's Shelter Support and Services Division, who's providing technical support. In a few minutes, we will walk you through the agenda and the program. But before we do that, we just want to take a minute to do our land acknowledgement. And I'm going to call on Suhal Ahmed, if you could do that, please.
Thanks, Bruce. We acknowledge the land we are on is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands.
Thank you very much for that, Suhal. The purpose of tonight's session is to find out more about the city's plan to build a youth shelter at 1615 Dufferin Street. So we're here to hear from you, but we're also here to hear from a panel of city officials to talk about this. And we're here to answer as many of your questions as possible and to take down your comments. Tonight's meeting is being recorded, and this session will be posted to the city's website along with the slide deck that you see here. Please do not share any confidential information about yourself or another party. If you do have something that you need to discuss confidentially, please, you can reach out to us through this email address on the screen, 1615dufferin@gmail.com, and then we'll put you in touch with the right person. And a little bit later on in the evening, we will explain how you can ask a question, how you can put your hand up, or how you can submit it in writing. We will not be screening those calls, so you will actually be able to speak directly to the panel and to all of the folks who are assembled here to make your comments directly. As with any meeting I facilitate, I always like to remind participants to keep their comments concise, constructive, and considerate of other views. The shorter the question or comment, the more people get a chance to speak. And we've got a code of conduct, I think, that we're going to put up. Is that the next? Yeah, okay, there you go. A little bit about the Zoom system. And we will explain a little bit later on how you can ask a question, how do you put that up. Here's the code of conduct. So we've put this up on the screen. We know that people have strong views, pro and con, with respect to the proposed shelter. And we just ask people to be considerate and not to use language that would further victimize the people we're trying to support through this initiative, or to use hurtful or hateful language. And I think next up, we're going to go to another acknowledgement. And I'm going to call on Zuna. Zuna, if I could get you to turn your screen on.
Sorry, I lost internet there for a second. The City of Toronto acknowledges all treaty people, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those.
I think we may have lost Zuna. So maybe I could just finish that off by just saying that we um, acknowledge those who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery, and we pay tribute to those ancestors of African descent and origin. Thank you very much, Zuna. I think we lost a little bit of your audio, but I did want to make sure that we thank you for that. In terms of the agenda, there'll be about 30 minutes of presentation, and then we'll deal with a couple of questions. We get questions through the email portal. So some of those common questions, we're just going to get those out right away. And then we'll open the floor to other comments or questions when we get a little farther along. We'll explain how you can do that. There are a lot of people on the call. I think we're over 100 people on the call right now, which is fantastic news. So we'll try and get through as many of those calls or comments as possible. If you're just joining, my name is Bruce Davis, and I'm your host and facilitator. I'm part of a consulting team hired by the City of Toronto to assist with the community engagement for this project. And I'm joined by my colleague Yasmin Youssef, who's going to be helping us with the questions tonight. Our panel tonight, I'm just going to very quickly introduce them, and then we're going to go to a special guest or one of our key leaders in the community. First, we're going to start, just introduce the panel. Loretta Ramadan is the Director of Infrastructure Planning and Development for the city's Shelter and Support Services Division. So she has responsibility for the rollout of the city's shelter expansion program citywide. So I think it's important that we hear that citywide perspective. Alison Folisea is the Director of Transaction Services for the city's Corporate Real Estate Management Division. So she brings the site selection and the real estate background to this conversation today. Lorraine Clark is the Manager, Operations and Support Services of the city's various homelessness prevention services, and will give us some insight in terms of how shelters are actually run and how operators are selected. On the community engagement side, we've already heard from Suhal Ahmed. Suhal will be speaking about he's the Manager of Planning Engagement, and will focus on the plan in terms of how we can keep you engaged going forward. In addition, we have other city staff and subject matter experts who are on the call. So if we need them, depending on what you ask, we may have to bring them up, and we'll do the introductions at the appropriate time. Next, I note that Councillor Alejandra Bravo is on the call. And you obviously, Councillor, have a citywide view of what's going on this. You chair the Community and Economic Development Committee. Tonight, you're here as our ward councillor. And I know you wanted to bring greetings, and I've just asked, thank you for doing this, but also, you know, people may have questions for you tonight, and it would be great if you could kind of hold, and then at the end of the night, maybe recap and give us a little bit of a recap in terms of what you've heard and what you think. So let's go to Councillor Alejandra Bravo.
Thank you, Bruce. Davenport, as you all know by now, is one of 6 wards across Toronto, including Scarborough, North York, and Etobicoke, who are receiving a new shelter. And within 10 years, that number will grow to 20 across the city. This is a new plan approved by all of City Council to offer better shelters, better value for money for the public, and better outcomes for residents in shelters and for the community as a whole. Every town and city in Canada is faced with the homelessness crisis right now. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario spoke with one voice to the provincial and federal government, raising the alarm. Doesn't matter how small the town or how big the city, we're in this situation together. So this is an important news and a development for what Toronto has to do to face this human emergency. And there's so many reasons for people to find themselves without a home. I was in a meeting recently with former city councillor and Liberal MPP Lorenzo Berardinetti. He shared his own story of living in a shelter. He fell on hard times without a pension following a divorce. And while as a councillor, he spoke against the shelter in his area, today he's speaking for their importance. It's a first step into a home. It's a prescription to fix every illness, and it's healthcare in a sense for our society. Doctors will tell you that a roof is the best way that we will all get better. In Davenport, we have encampments in parks across the ward. You will have seen many of them. At Dufferin Grove Park and Dufferin and Bloor, I've learned from city staff about the conversations they've had with people there. People this winter unzipping their tent in the morning to leave to go to work all day and then come home to a tent at the end of the night. That's half the population in that encampment. And there was a youth that was helped out of there. A youth was living in one of the tents in that park. Now, the plan that was approved by council is to place 50 young people in our neighborhood in a youth shelter. This is also where I live. Many of you will know that I am a neighbor. My children went to the local schools, and I take the 929, the 29 on the regular. like with any new development or any new service that comes into the neighborhood, my responsibility is to the community as a whole and to the new residents and to work to make things work. In this meeting, you're going to learn directly from Toronto Shelter Services and Supports what this project does and doesn't. You will receive information about what it is and what it isn't. And I think it's my responsibility here to listen to your question and comments. And many people have written in with concerns, many people with excited to support. I am here to listen to any view. And as Bruce said, we'll be taking careful note and making an effort to respond to every question that's directed at me, not in this meeting, but as a follow-up, so that we can get through your specific questions about the project. I do want to leave you with my own experience. In 1974, as a small child, I had to leave the country where I was born, Chile, because of a military coup. And when my family landed in Toronto, we stayed in a shelter for a few weeks. It was by Union Station. And that shelter was the first step into my parents working and building a life and giving my brother and I a life, which I have now lived in Davenport for most of it. So I'll just leave it there, and please know that we're here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you very much for that. I should also mention our MP, Julie Derwitz, is she's just finishing up a town hall meeting that she has somewhere else in the ward. And I believe that she and her staff will be listening in for the Q&A part because they're going from one place to another. And I think I understand they're going to be listening on tonight's meeting. So let's get started with the presentations. First, with an overview of the citywide plan. And Loretta Ramadan's here, the Director of Infrastructure Planning and Development for the city's Shelter and Support Services Division. Loretta, over to you.
Thank you, Bruce. And thank you everyone for attending today. I understand there is a lot of interest about the new site, and through this presentation, we hope to answer as many questions as possible. I want to begin with sharing some general information. The City of Toronto operates the largest shelter system in the country, sheltering approximately 12,000 people each night. That's over 50% of all available shelter beds in Ontario. But even with that many beds, the shelter system is full every night, and there is an urgent need for action to help address the issue of homelessness in Toronto. In 2024, on average, about 200 callers to central intake were not matched to a shelter space each day. With many people unable to access shelter beds each night, there is an increased number of individuals sleeping outdoors and in encampments. While housing is the ultimate solution to homelessness, shelters are necessary on an emergency basis to fill the gap when people are in an immediate housing crisis. Despite the large number of clients supported through the city's shelter system, and over 4,300 people moved from shelter into permanent housing in 2024, the need for emergency shelter has significantly increased over the last few years. This is due to many factors, including an insufficient affordable housing supply, increased costs of living and inflation, and inadequate wage and income supports. Next slide, please. The shelter system includes shelters, respites, temporary winter spaces, and drop-in centers. Drop-ins provide a range of services that may include food, healthcare, showers, laundry, information and referrals, and social and recreational activities to people who are homeless or at risk of experiencing homelessness. Pet services are also available for people staying at shelter sites. In addition, the city offers other services to those experiencing homelessness. Examples include street outreach, where staff, through Streets to Homes, work to connect with individuals living outside to build trusting relationships and help address immediate health and safety needs, and to find permanent housing. Through this work, in 2024, we saw the resolution of 155 encampments throughout Ward 9 on parks and recreation properties. We also have housing help centers where nonprofit agencies help people find and keep housing and to avoid eviction. Housing help services are available in most shelters and drop-in centers as well. The city also operates public washrooms and showers, including some that have been winterized and are open year-round. Information on services for those experiencing homelessness, including warming centers, can be found on the city's website at toronto.ca/homelesshelp. Next slide. The Homelessness Services Capital Infrastructure Strategy was developed to proactively inform the city's shelter-related capital spending decisions in order to promote recovery and stability in the shelter system over the next 10 years. The capital strategy was adopted by Council in November of 2023, with a subsequent real estate strategy adopted by Council in February of 2024. At the time of approval, 48% of the city's shelter spaces were held in short-term contracts and leases, and shelter space was decreasing, despite the significant demand, due to COVID-19 shelter hotel closures as part of the council-approved COVID-19 Transition and Relocation Plan. Also at the time of the strategy's approval, the operating budget of the shelter system continued to increase, with a significant portion of the cost being related to the use of short-term leases and contracts. The capital strategy focuses on the long-term sustainability of the city's shelter system through investment in existing and new permanent purpose-built shelter spaces. Both purchased and long-term lease sites produce substantial cost savings while simultaneously improving client outcomes by being built to be more accessible and more responsive to the diverse needs of shelter clients. Through this capital plan, up to 20 new shelter sites with approximately 1,600 shelter spaces will be developed from 2024 to 2033. The model will allow the city to transition out of and close the expensive shelter hotels, leading to an anticipated savings of up to $127 per bed per night, representing $74 million in operational cost savings over 20 years. The first 6 of these 20 sites was announced in 2024, including 1615 Dufferin Street. I will now pass it over to my colleague Allison, who will speak about how this site was selected.
Thanks so much, Loretta. Go on to the next slide. I think it is really important to reiterate council direction that ensured the implementation of the capital infrastructure strategy. As Loretta mentioned, in February 2024, City Council approved the real estate strategy, which focused on expediting the redevelopment of existing city-owned sites or acquiring new sites for permanent purpose-built shelters with the goal of securing at least 5 opportunities in 2024. The report further provided that once sites were identified and secured, the design and construction timelines were 1 year for design and 2 years to renovate existing buildings for occupancy. These timelines have really influenced our assessment of opportunities and our evaluation of properties. Shelters are one of the many municipal services that the city provides, and like daycares and libraries and community centers, they must be available in all neighborhoods across the city. Sites are located within communities, which means they're often located near other community services, like childcare centers, schools, and parks. When searching for new shelter locations, city staff are looking for buildings that are available, affordable, of a suitable size, and close to key services such as transit. While this list isn't exhaustive, it's a combination of key criteria that were used in our evaluation. Through both the infrastructure strategy and past council authorities, staff have the authority to both site new shelters and secure new shelters in locations that meet zoning requirements before engaging with the community. These authorities were delegated to ensure the city is able to quickly respond to the shelter system and ensure that we can provide critical shelter services and support as many people as possible. It's also important to note that when the city is in the process of opening a new shelter, community engagement commences once the site has been identified and secured. Community engagement is focused on operational and integration considerations to ensure that the shelter is able to open and successfully operate in the community as a good neighbor. Next slide. So then how did we do it? We knew we needed to move fast, but we wanted to make sure we had a process that was consistent around site analysis and evaluation, so it could be applied predictably throughout the implementation of the capital infrastructure program, which is expected to be implemented over several years. First, we formed a multi-divisional working group for site evaluation, comprised of representatives from our real estate team, the shelters group, and CreateTO, which is the city's strategic real estate agency. Specifically, we assessed almost 200 sites across the city, many of which were city-owned. And our analysis took place on a two-step process. First, focusing on a desktop analysis that allowed us to quickly move through sites that met key criteria, focusing on building size, location, availability of certain amenities, and whether the site was available. If a site makes it through the desktop analysis, it moves on to a more specific diligence process where we evaluate the availability of the site at fair market value, specific assessments around the condition of the property, with a particular focus on whether the property could be converted within the timelines directed by council, and an assessment on renovation costs. As noted, all of our transactions through our authorities must be transacted at fair market value. The sites must meet our key considerations around space, proximity to amenities, and proximity to existing shelters. I'll pass it on to my colleague, Lorraine. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, my hopes is to speak about the shelter operations and the operator, and give you a high-level overview of the shelter that is being built at 1615 Dufferin Street. So its tentatively opening date would be 2027, with approximately 50 spaces for youths aged 16 to 24. The shelter operator and programmings are in the process of being determined now. It's going to be a 27 staffing operations, and all locations are staffed. All shelter locations are usually staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Next slide. I would like to take some time to just try to answer some common misunderstandings of how shelters are operated. As indicated, clients are not required to leave the site during the day. They operate like any other home where they go to work and they participate in the community. They'll go to school, they'll have part-time jobs. Shelter staff will work with clients throughout the day and the night for those that are working, and harm reductions and overdose prevention, including naloxone kits, will be of use. Good neighbor policies. As per the Toronto Shelter Standards, the shelter provider will have a good neighbor policy and procedure, and this will include community liaison committees and is founded on the following principles: respect and dignity, collaboration, and accountability. Respect and dignity is engagement process must prioritize the respects of all individuals in the community. Collaboration is an engagement with a two-way process, fostering collaboration relationships between the site the clients, and the community members. And accountabilities, giving feedback from the clients and the community, will inform program improvements and decision making. Staff there's specialized trained staff, not only in our partnerships, but our partnerships are just part of the equations. Equally important is ensuring that all staff are prepared to meet the challenges they face every day. And that's why all of our team members undergo specialized training. They are skilled in harm reduction strategies, including overdose preventions and the use of naloxone as a tool that can save lives. They're also equipped with conflict resolution, crisis management techniques, which allow them to navigate situations and calm and effectively. And perhaps most critical, they are trained to respond immediately to non-police and non-EMS related matters, demonstrating our commitment to bringing a proactive, trusted, and resourceful being part of a community. Shelter operations, next slide. At the heart of every shelter program is the commitment to providing comprehensive wraparound support services. These approaches ensure that every individual has access to the tools and the resources they need to rebuild their lives and achieve long-term stability. Day programs and on-site community services. Shelter operators often offer a range of day programs designed to equip clients with essential life skills. These include budgeting workshops, housing focus sessions, and life skills training, all aimed at fostering independence and resilience. In addition, on-site community services are tailored to address diverse client needs. Health-related services provide critical medical supports. They offer education, skill training to empower individuals in achieving employment and academic goals. And because we recognize the bond between clients and their pets, operators also provide pet care support, allowing pet owners to stay connected with their companions during challenging times. One of the most powerful aspects of our shelter program is the collaboration we build with our partner agencies. These partnerships allow for us to offer these comprehensive wraparound supports that address the full range of our client needs. Client partnership provides an ensuite of on-site services. For instance, income support referral connect clients to critical financial resources, helping them stabilize their lives and make them transition to permanent housing. We also ensure that they have access to primary healthcare services, which will address addressing both the immediate and ongoing physical and mental health challenges. Some operators provide integrated health and mental health supports, addressing both immediate and long-term well-being. By working with these dedicated community partners, we'll ensure the shelter's ability to provide meaningful and holistic care for our clients. These on-site services extend far beyond the basics. Client case managements are personalized with housing plans that are designed to meet each client with their unique circumstances and goal. Our shelter system provides trauma-informed care and harm reduction intervention, ensuring that clients are supported with dignity and respect, no matter what their circumstances. We also believe in the power of recreation, social connections, and personal growth. And that is why our providers offer programming that includes recreational activities, social engagement, opportunities, and pathways for employment and education. I hope this information provides better understanding of how shelter operates. And I'll pass it on to my colleague, Suhal.
Thanks, Lorraine. I appreciate that. My name is Suhal Ahmed. I'm the Manager of Planning Engagement within Toronto Shelters and Support Services. Next slide, please. I want to clarify that we are incredibly committed to working with neighbors to support the success of our shelter sites. We believe that working with neighbors and having a meaningful dialogues ensures that we can build shelters that are successful. The city is investing heavily into this site, and we want to make sure the site is successful not just for our clients, but for the wider community and the city as a whole. What that means is that we are committed to sharing information accurately about the service through our website and other avenues, such as emails, through newsletters, community bulletins, etc. We also want to foster meaningful communication and collaboration with local partners and stakeholders. Especially when the operator joins, we will look for avenues to have smaller community meetings to discuss with local stakeholders to better understand the neighborhood and area. We want to ensure your concerns are heard and priorities are proactively addressed as we develop this shelter site. I do want to emphasize that the engagement process is really focused on how we can make this shelter successful in this community, not the service location. The city, based on the recommendations of City Council, does not consult on the location of shelters, and the community engagement process is started as soon as the city has identified a site as viable as a shelter, and we move forward with those sites. This has been a long-standing policy of the city since around 2017, and it has come up at City Council many times and has been supported by City Council as a whole as the best way to move forward to depolitize the selection of shelter sites and focus our engagement on ensuring the success of our shelter system. To that end, key part of our engagement is the hiring of community engagement facilitators, such as Public Progress, led by Bruce Davis. They join the city to help lead the community engagement process while bringing expertise in managing complex engagement projects. They help track and collect the feedback you share with us and write it into reports and bulletins, and ensure we are up to date on what the community is hearing and saying. We want to ensure that we're utilizing your feedback to update our programming and our plans for the site to ensure it is the most successful it can be. And we are always listening to the community and providing avenues for community members to be heard and have their say. Next slide, please. This slide goes over the various ways you can get more information and also ask information of the city. One way to get a continuously updated information on the site, including when we announce the operator, or when we provide more details about the planned program, and as well as the design of the building. These will be updated on the city's website at toronto.ca/1615-Dufferin. If you are more curious about the general engagement plan around how we're opening 20 sites across the city, if you want us to look at videos and images of sites we've already created, you can go to our wider plans website, toronto.ca/new shelters. If you would like to ask questions specifically about this site, you can email Public Progress at 1615-Dufferin, and they will provide responses if they can. If not, they will connect with the city to ensure you get a response as soon as possible. However, if you have a question that's more specific to general homelessness or about the strategy as a whole, you can email us at the City of Toronto at homeless.support@toronto.ca. I'll pass it back to Bruce.
Thank you very much for that, Suhal. I should mention that, thank you for the community engagement piece. I should mention that in addition to tonight's session, we are doing a community survey, and a little bit later on, we'll put up a QR code on the screen so that you'll be able to fill out the survey either from your phone or from your computer. So that was a quick run through in terms of the overall shelter expansion plan, how sites are selected, how they operate, plus how you can stay involved. So now I'd like to open things up to questions, and there are two ways that you can get your question in front of us. The first is you can type your question into the feature in Zoom, and I think we already have about 50 questions waiting in the queue, so we're going to try and go through those as quickly as possible. We're going to kind of smoosh some of them together. If they are very similar, we're going to try and just consolidate a few of them. And then also, if you'd like to ask your question live, you can put your hand up. If you're on the phone, you just press *9 and that will put your hand up. And I think we have a couple of folks right now. I think we have about 30 people on the call. So that's a really, really amazing turnout for the community. Before we open things up to the live questions, there are questions that have been coming in through the email, quite a few. So why don't we get started with those? And that'll get us warmed up a little bit. And I'm going to go to, I think we'll go to Loretta or Lorraine with this question. One of the issues that comes up in the emails or through our conversations with local residents or businesses, and that's the issue of safety. And I see a lot of that in the Q&A list tonight. The issue of community safety, safety for the youth who will live at the shelter, but also safety for the neighborhood. So Loretta or Lorraine, I'm not sure who wants to jump in on this, but based on your experience, what can neighbors expect when a shelter like this comes to the neighborhood? And how does the city or the operator respond when and if there are issues, community safety issues? Loretta?
I can start and then Lorraine can jump in. The city is committed to the safety and security of clients, staff, and the broader community, working together to ensure the success of the site. Shelters are located and successfully operated in residential neighborhoods throughout the city of Toronto, many of which include community services such as schools, library, community centers, and healthcare services. We work closely with our service operators to develop ongoing community safety measures at the site, and staff are committed to working with the community stakeholders, including Toronto Police, to discuss issues related to community safety.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Is my screen working okay? I can't tell if my screen is working okay. Okay, next question here. I have one that comes up frequently and it's in the chat as well. The whole issue of consumption treatment. Is this site will it be a consumption treatment site? How does it work? And I think Lorraine, you've mentioned harm reduction services. What does that mean? And can you briefly explain what that means? But is this a consumption treatment site? Can someone answer that?
Thanks, Bruce. So no, this site is not a consumption site. What we do have is that we have a harm reduction policies that is part of our shelter standards. Operators have policies in place to support our clients and also have healthcare support services with community partners to help support clients' healthcare needs, and that's the emphasis, is to support them through their journeys. We do not do needle exchange or anything like that on this particular property. This property is focused on the harm reduction, and it's an approach to support clients through their journey.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now we're going to open up the floor to some questions live. We are not pre-screening the calls or questions. Please pose your questions to the panel and we'll try and get the right person to answer. If you're going to ask the counselor a question, we've asked the counselor to kind of wait until the end of the evening and then to summarize, and she can cover some of the points if you're making those. As with any meeting I facilitate, I always like to remind people to make their comments concise, constructive, and considerate of other views. So we're going to go first. I'm going to read off a couple of names just so that you're ready. I think we're going to go to A. Albano first, and then we're going to go to Rosa. So A. Albano, go ahead. You have a question? Go ahead. If you just unmute your mic.
Hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So good evening. My concern is that there was absolutely no say in this matter by the residents who were tax paying about even having this on our site. How can you say that there is community engagement when you've already decided this is happening?
Okay, thank you very much for that. So Loretta, let's come back to this. This is something that we do here when people say you've already made the decision, you've already decided on the site, you've already decided this is going ahead. And all of that was done before you even announced it. So how do you put those two things together? Loretta, do you want to take a stab at that?
Thank you for the question. When the city is in the process of opening a new shelter, community engagement commences once a site has been identified and secured. Community engagement is focused on the operational and integration considerations to ensure the shelter is able to open and successfully operate in the community as a good neighbor. The city shelter siting and related work to secure such sites does not include consultation, which reflects the City Council direction to city staff in 2017 and 2021 relating to the city's approved process on shelter siting and community engagement.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Next, I'm going to go to Rosa and then Meg. Rosa, I'm going to open your mic. Go ahead, Rosa. Rosa, go ahead. I think you have to press unmute. And after Rosa, I'm going to go to Meg next. Rosa, go ahead. Okay, why don't we go to Meg next, and then we'll come back to Rosa. Meg, you're next. Go ahead. You have a question.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say I'm a resident in the neighborhood and a trauma psychotherapist, and I work a lot with people who've experienced violence and traumatic injury over the course of their lives. And I just want to really indicate my strong support for this project. I think it's really essential that we have services for youth who are vulnerable and marginalized. And so I just want to strongly indicate from the perspective of someone who works in a professional context around supporting people who have lived very difficult things that, yeah, lots of us really want this support to be available to our neighbors. So thanks so much for holding this consultation.
Okay, thank you very much, Meg. I'm going to go back to Rosa. Do you want to try Rosa again? If you would like to open up your microphone, Rosa, go ahead. And Rosa, I think you also have some questions in the Q&A chat. So if we can't get you to go live, we'll just refer to some of the questions that you have in the other thing. Next, we're going to go to Carmel. And after Carmel, I have Daniel. Carmel, go ahead. Carmel, you have a question.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I am a shelter worker. I work at a gender-based violence shelter. I used to work at homeless shelters previously. I wanted to say that I really support bringing in this very much needed service. It's really hard having to turn people away, and that we have to do that so often is really sad, especially for youth who if they don't have somewhere to stay, they may end up on the street, or they may have to stay in a shelter for adults, which is not always a great place for them. So I really am glad. And the question I have actually is for any of you. Just wondering, as a neighbor, I live in the area, what I can do to ensure that this shelter is a success.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's actually one of the questions we do get in through our email chat as well. Maybe I'll go to Lorraine on that. Lorraine, people want to know what they can do to help. Once this is open and we have an operator, how can people get involved in supporting it? Lorraine?
Yes, and I want to thank that caller Camille for that. We understand that, we've got a lot of community partners out there, and residents that are out there want to be supportive to the shelter provider that is there. So once the provider is in place, there will be a lot of engagements in the community, and you will be able to participate in making donations, participating in some of their programming and events that they have. That's part of the strategy of providers in becoming community integrated. So yes, there will be opportunities for the community to participate in supporting the shelter once the provider is announced.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to go to Daniel, but I also want to mention Yasmin. After Daniel, can you just read off some of the questions that are in the chat box, and then we can get some answers to those ones. Let's go to Daniel next. Daniel, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'll be quick. I live in the area. I support this project. I just want to know why the market rates and why so many consultants. Why does it take so long? Like, because, I feel very strongly in support of this because, like, these are children and, children deserve our support.
Okay, let's go to Loretta. Loretta, why is this taking so long? And why are there so many consultants involved?
So as a construction project, it generally takes a period of time to design the site, and then hire a general contractor to facilitate the actual construction work. We just find that that process does tend to take about a 2-year period. As much as possible, however, we are working to advance and fast track a lot of that work, but we do also want to make sure the space is thoughtfully designed to the best interest of the youth that will be staying there, and that it is constructed in a good way.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We're going to go to Yasmin. You're going to bring up some of the questions. While you're doing that, can I just ask Daniel Johnson, can you just proceed to the next slide? I think we have a slide with the QR code. If we could just go to the slide with the QR code. Yeah, there. So folks, we are going to keep doing this Q&A thing. There is a survey. It's a confidential survey. We don't ask for your name, but we do ask what street you live on, or if you're business or residential or whatever. If you could just scan the QR code, you can do it on your phone or on your computer, and we're getting some really good feedback. And I think it's important that we able to document some of this. Anyway, go ahead, Yasmin. Thank you very much for sorting. It's like drinking from a fire hose. There's so many questions. We have like 100 questions in the Q&A. Some people are just firing constantly, but what have you got some good ones for us?
Yes, thank you, Bruce. So the first one I got here is, could you please explain how the risks regarding proximity to schools were assessed and detail how it was concluded that this is not a safety concern for the schools in the proximity?
Okay, so my suggestion, maybe we want to start with Loretta and then go to Allison. Is that possible? Because I know you're part of the site selection process. Do we want to start with Loretta on that and then go to Allison?
Yep. So the city and its operating partners have significant experience in successfully operating homelessness services in proximities to schools and childcare facilities. I mentioned earlier that they're located and operated in many residential neighborhoods right throughout the city of Toronto, near community services. We have an example of a men's shelter located downtown Toronto that's co-located with a childcare center that has minimal community impact.
Allison, do you want to jump in on this? You're doing on the corporate real estate management. Virtually every neighborhood, you're close to a school or a childcare center. It's just the nature of the urban fabric that virtually every site is close to community facilities. Allison?
Yeah, I think that's right, Bruce. Thank you. I think Loretta covered the key concepts is that shelters are part of the community. And we work very hard once a site is selected to ensure that through operational and design considerations, community characteristics and opportunities are made available through those processes in terms of consultation. But across the board, we do see these shelters in vicinity to a variety of different types of other city services, such as libraries, parks, and childcare centers.
Okay, thank you very much. Yasmin, have you got another one for us?
Yeah. What is the definition of youth shelter for this particular shelter? What is the age range, as well as what is the gender?
Okay, do we want to go to Lorraine? What is youth? What is the age for youth? Lorraine?
Hi. So as stated before, the ages is between 16 and 24.
Okay. And this will be, you're anticipating this will be for all genders, this particular shelter. We don't know who the operator is, but is that your expectation?
Yes, mixed gender, sorry.
Okay. Super. Yasmin, one more for you, and then we're going to go back to the list. When we go back to the list, we're going to go to Claire next. So Yasmin, you've got another one.
Yes, I do. Another question is, why is the community not included in the selection of the operator?
Okay, Lorraine, do we want to start with you and then see who else would like to jump in? Or Suhal? Suhal, you're going to jump in on this one. What role, if any, does the public play in selecting an operator, or why are they not involved? Suhal.
Yeah, the city has an expression of interest that went out last fall to select operators for the youth, adults, and seniors and family sector for these new sites. It was important to us to create a robust selection process for operators that was based on people's ability to and experience previously in running effective shelters and their ability to demonstrate that and propose a new the shelter model that aligns with our best practice and shelter standards. Our priority when selecting shelter operators is to ensure that they can support our clients in the best way possible. All of our shelter operators through the shelter standards are expected to work with community on a regular basis to get community feedback and continually improve the services where it applies to programming that's relevant to their work. If the community identifies challenges through those channels that are outside the work of the shelter, then we at the city help the operator connect with other divisions, police services, Toronto Fire, or others as needed to address community concerns as well. So it's a continuous process, and we do try to include community in the engagement process through things like community liaison committees and other activities. However, our priority when selecting our operator is based on the need to support our clients.
Actually, while we've got you on the screen and the question of operators, in the life of a project like this, when would you normally expect an operator to be selected? Is that something that happens after a year, or is that something that happens at the beginning, or where does that fall in generally?
Yeah, as I said earlier, we did do the EOI in the fall. We're at the final stages right now. We're hoping to announce the operators in the coming months. It's a process through which we do a lot of due diligence to ensure that everything they shared in their application is correct, and that when we go offer them, we are aligning them with a site that they can work with, and we enter into an agreement with them. So we are in that process right now with all of these 6 sites. We are hearing community feedback, and those things will be considerations when we're building out the program with the operator over the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Yasmin. I'm going to go on to Claire next. And so if you want to go take a look at some more questions, we have about 15 people who have their hands up, I think. So let's see how many of these we want to get through as many as possible. We're going to Claire, and then we're going to go to Marjorie. And I'm just going down the list. It's not like I'm picking names of people I know or something, or friendly names or names from the neighborhood. I'm just going straight down the list. Claire, you're next, and then Marjorie. Claire, go ahead. Whoops. I think I may have done that backwards. I think I pressed the wrong button. So I think Marjorie, go ahead, and then I'll go back to Claire. Sorry about that. I pressed the wrong button. Marjorie, go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, good.
My question and my concern is this. Why are vulnerable youth between 16 to 17 being sheltered with unhoused adults? Because the provincial Ministry of Children Community Services provides services, CAS, and housing for youth who are homeless. May not be the greatest, might be a hotel. That's my question.
Super, and I thank you. And I know that we've also had that call come into our service earlier in the week. So the question is 16 and 17-year-olds. They're on the cusp of adulthood, and they're also potentially a CAS ward. And who on our team would like to answer that question? Is that going to Loretta, or is that going to Lorraine, or who would be able to answer that? Loretta, go ahead.
I can start and Lorraine can jump in. So at 16 and 17 years old, the youth has a choice. And yes, there's a choice for them to admit themselves to be a ward under CAS, but they can also choose not to do so, which is why our youth shelter system is set up to serve individuals age 16 to 24.
Okay, does anyone else want to jump in on that one? Okay, and turns out that Claire had put her hand down, so that's why I didn't miss her. Claire had actually put her hand down. Lorraine, do you want to jump in on this question of 16 and 17-year-olds?
Yeah, so what I was just going to say is that the saying, just to jump on what Loretta had said, that the youth are prioritized between 16 and 24, and that when you're in that cuff of that borderline, it is volunteer, and it is, if they would like to continue with the society or they would like to be in the shelter. So we provide wraparound supports to those clients in shelter systems to ensure that they have the choices that they need to facilitate their journey.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We're going to go to Hannah, and then we're going to go to Mike. Hannah, go ahead. You are next. You can open up your microphone. Hannah, go ahead.
Hello. Sorry. You go stop. Sorry about that. I wanted to ask a question specifically about the harm reduction policy. I know it was touched on earlier in the evening, but can somebody explain more specifically how that's going to work in practice, how the city and the operator will ensure the shelter's operations are safe and respectful, both for the residents and for the surrounding community? Like, what are the requirements for the youth that will live there? Stipulations on what allows them to continue staying there? Just saying that the policy, there's a lot of gray area that I don't fully understand.
This is the number one thing we get questions about. This is the number one thing we get questions about. Lorraine, maybe we can just take a minute to reiterate what is harm reduction generally? Is drug use actually allowed on site? How do you manage that? And what forms does harm reduction take? Lorraine.
Okay, the harm reduction policies in the Toronto shelter system is designed to support individuals who use substances while ensuring safety for all shelter residents, staff, and the surrounding community. It follows best practices to minimize substance-related harm without requiring abstinence. Thus being said, harm reduction is a safe, non-judgmental support. Shelter staff do not provide substance, but they do not deny service to individuals who use substance. Clients are encouraged to discuss their needs and access harm reduction supports, including referrals to health and addiction services. Also, a part of that harm reduction structure, there's usually education and overdose prevention and recognition and response, like the naloxone administration. Clients receive education on safer substance use practices and risk associated with drug use. Access to supplies, the shelter has harm reduction naloxone kits to help support clients who are on that journey. These supplies help reduce the risk of overdose and unsafe consumption practices. And so we also have built-in health services that help support clients in those journeys. We partner with community agencies like ECHA and LOFT to help clients through their journey. So that's built into the systems. Most shelters have harm reduction policies, which they are ensuring that their staff are trained and that they will be able to support clients that are in need. So I hope that answers your question. Did I miss anything?
It's just that you're mentioning all the supports for the residents, which I can appreciate, but how does it help the surrounding community? Because it gets mentioned but not specifically answered. Like, what about policies? Like, how are they going to support the community beyond the building itself?
In terms of clients coming to I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand that.
I think I'll jump in for a minute here. We operate from a good neighbors policy to ensure that our clients are being members of the community in a good way.
And then what if we are finding that there are issues, because it's not a perfect system, it's not a perfect society, what recourse does the community have in reaching out when they're feeling that unsafe?
So Hannah, maybe I'm just trying to get this right. Are you asking about things like public drug taking outside of the shelter, or
Well, it could be
drug
that.
paraphernalia?
Well,
Is
it
that what
could
you're-
be that, but it could also be that because they're not being required to abstain, and they're being educated a certain way, but not needing to abstain, they then leave the shelter, potentially under the influence of drugs, and walking my kids to school. If I come across somebody who is acting irate, for example,
Right.
what recourse do I have as a community member and as a parent? Who do I call? What do I do? And what are the repercussions and next steps? Because we
Excellent.
have to anticipate that it's a possibility.
No, this is it. Now we're getting to it. Go ahead, Sue Hall. Go ahead.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, we always want to ensure that community members have a channel to provide feedback to the shelter, and we're always continuously evaluating our shelters to ensure they are being successful in the community. One way we try to get regular conversation with the community is through a community liaison committee that starts around like 3 months before the shelter opens, and it stays on after it is open, where members, representatives of the community like businesses, resident groups, and residents at large can come and discuss any issues, such as if they find needles in the schoolyards or something, and work with the city to problem solve those issues. We also are ensuring each of these new sites have dedicated resources to community engagement. So there's always going to be a contact for you to reach out to provide your feedback and have someone work with you to address those. Again, as I said earlier in the day, we really want to ensure these sites are successful. There'll be continuous evaluation of the services. If like most of our shelter sites that we have open that have been purpose built have not had significant challenges with like drug use or like needles being dropped on site. However, in other sites where like larger hotels or other stuff that we're trying to move away from, where that has been a challenge, we have implemented like community safety teams where there would be people who would go into the community and pick up needles. But again, that's a tool of last resort if it gets to that level. But we believe and have experienced the majority of time that we don't experience that type of issue.
Why not do that on a preventative level instead of waiting for the problem to be big?
Because we don't see that issue the majority of the time, right? We always have that service available, and we are prepared to go out and we will monitor and evaluate the situation as it comes. But we don't want to, again, waste taxpayer dollars on a service that may not actually turn out to be required. I know there's a lot of apprehension about the impact it could have on our community, but we've opened 8 of these purpose-built shelters over the last few years, and almost all of them have been incredibly successful throughout their existence. And we want to ensure that this site, and we will work with you over the next 2 years to ensure it is successful from the get-go. And we don't want to plan for it to not be successful. We want to plan for it to be successful.
Hannah, I'm going to suggest that we pause just there because I do have a few other folks, but thank you very much, because this is the number one question that we get. Yep. Yasmin, I'm going to come back to you, but I want to go to Mike, Julia, Melissa. I'm going to go to Mike, Julia, Melissa, and then I'm going to come back to you, okay, Yasmin, if that's okay, because I'm trying to get through as many of these as we possibly can. Someone has indicated they're having trouble with the QR code. So if someone can let me know if that QR code is wonky, then we may have to get that fixed. But let's go to, I think I said Mike, right? Mike is next. Sorry, I'm just scrolling down. Mike, go ahead. You're next. You can open your mic. Mike?
Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, most of the pushback that you seem to be getting tonight is the selection of this location. It's not just the idea of a shelter. For example, this location, I don't know if you know this or not, the private property that was purchased was serving the healthcare needs of the community at the time. There were doctors there, there was healthcare there. So taking that away, I don't think was a great idea. So the location is an issue. Picking a location directly beside a library and within 200 meters of 4 schools, again, it's the location that is causing some people to show apprehension. And the final thing I want to say tonight is basically, can you confirm that there was no conflict of interest among municipal government officials and the seller of the private property?
Okay, Mike, thank you very much. Allison, let's go to you. This is with respect to the purchase of the property. Go ahead. I think your mic is off. No, Allison? I cannot hear you.
Sorry, Bruce, try that now.
Yep, that's better. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mike, for the question. Yes, I can confirm that there was no conflict of interest. I know that there have been questions about the fact that this site was not openly available on the market or apparently listed as a site for sale. I note that the city has been very public about the fact that we are in the market for opportunities around acquisitions. We did that through various reports to council. And so we do get unsolicited offers around potential sites. Then we assess sites that are listed. We assess sites that are within our own portfolio. We assess sites that are available through other government partners, and we do get unsolicited offers. Each of those sites go through the same analysis and process that we talked about. First, the desktop study that sort of looked at the key criteria, and then a more detailed, diligent study that assesses the market value. And so that may be for both off or on market sites. The other piece that we have heard a few questions around is the fact that there were previous tenants that provided a critical service in the neighborhood. We know that a change of use is disruptive, and we worked very hard with the property owner to ensure that the tenants had as much time as they needed in order to be able to relocate. We cannot control when an owner has determined that they want to sell a property and the impact that it has on tenants. What we can control is the timeline within which we needed to move on the property and when we needed to complete the acquisition. And we did that in close consultation with the owner to ensure that those tenants had as much time. We also needed to respect the property owner's relationship with his tenants and the business that the property owner was running.
I'm sorry to interject. I know I still had the mic access, but you mentioned earlier in your report that the building to be deemed a site needed to be available, but this building was never for sale. And you also had said that it needed to be affordable, but it was purchased well over market value at $9.1 million. And the tenants were given 2 months notice to vacate just because we use the medical center and it's gone. So I just don't see how all those requirements were met, knowing this information as somebody who uses the building, uses the facility. I respectfully disagree.
I appreciate that, Hannah. Thanks for those comments. I would note that it was marketed in the past as a site that was for sale. It was specifically brought to the city through the owner's broker. And so the owner was clearly in a position to try to sell the property. All of our transactions must be at market value, and we had done appraisals to be able to support the analysis and the purchase price. So while I understand that the change and the acquisition has an impact on the community, we ensured that we worked within the direction that we had from City Council and our authorities as a staff to be able to transact, which was at market value.
Thank you very much for that, Allison. And I know people are going to ask questions and they're entitled to ask questions, but I've also noticed a lot of people are making allegations which are really unfair and it's inappropriate and it's very, very difficult for you, I know, as a public office holder to, you hear these things, but people have specifically asked, you've addressed the question, and I hope that people will feel very comfortable with the way that the city is managing its affairs to acquire the real estate. Thank you very much for that question, Mike,
We
and for
don't,
that.
hence the questions.
Sorry, I apologize. Somebody's jumping in there, and I'm not sure who that is. Can we just go to, thank you, Mike, for that. We're going to go to Julia next, and then we're going to go to Melissa. Julia, go ahead. Julia, you can open your mic.
Hi there. So I'm a resident and live a few blocks away from the site. And through my family, my sister, I have a lot of experience in the transitional housing space and the desperate need that that there is for these kinds of services, and really particularly appreciate that the one that has been selected for our neighborhood is targeting youth, because there's this homelessness is being experienced across all ages, but just like feeling in terms of a community, like what we can do to help youth get on their feet and start in work and get into the workforce, find a home. And so I was really interested in, you talked about the wraparound services, but in particular, how long do you expect each of the residents to stay there? Like, is it a shelter or is it transitional housing, and what kind of support will be provided through the operator or through other services to make that transition to permanent housing, employment, et cetera? And then there was an interesting question on this confidential survey, which was asking, what the community can do. And I don't have any particular ideas for that. You talked about a community liaison, kind of organization, but I would really suggest that you continue surveying the businesses and community, because there's so many creative people in the community and caring people, and we don't know what to do. Like, this is not our expertise, but it might be interesting to get, some suggestions, or because it's a bit open-ended, I don't know what to say, and so some ideas and how it might have worked in other communities, what has really been helpful for the residents and for the operators, is really just getting a handle on, okay, like, how does this work and how do we play?
Julia, thank you very much for that. So there are three pieces that I would like to just come back. Maybe Lorraine, we can go to you on this. How long typically would these young adults stay here? Is this permanent housing? Is this transitional housing? Is this a shelter? And what supports, if any, are available on site or through other agencies that are connected to help them launch into the next phase? And the third question was, how can we actually galvanize or bring together people from the community to help, and what do we want them to do? So Lorraine, do you want to start with that?
Okay. Thanks, Bruce. So to answer some of your questions, there's no particular typical stay of durations in shelters. We try to house clients as quickly as possible, but it's based on their particular needs at the time. We offer case management and housing support for each youth, and they will receive individualized case planning to connect them to housing, employment, education, mental health, all sorts of variety of things. Some things are skill building, and so that we kind of support them that way. We create a wraparound support. We try to help them with some of their mental concerns, or get them back on their feet, or give them the independence that they need to live independently in the community. Youth shelters are not new. There's been many youth shelters that are already in the city of Toronto that have been extremely successful. We've got Covenant House, we have Eva's Place, Eva's Satellite. There's a variety of programs and shelters that are out there that have been extremely successful in supporting youth. So how the community can continue to support that? Yes, there's business organizations and communities that are out there that can help support by their donations, or even offering mentorship programs and employment. So there's varieties of ways. Lots of programs that these youth shelters provide is family reunifications, mental health supports, and connecting them to training and creating successful educational paths. Did I miss anything?
No, that was a
Bruce?
big help. No, I think that
Okay.
was a big help. Thank you very much for that. And once the operator is set up, then they'll be able to set up their own community liaison or embrace committee or other vehicles to engage the community in a creative way. We had a really amazing call with someone today who has a photography studio and he wants to get young people involved in that. It's just phenomenal. The calls we're getting are amazing. I'm going to go to Yasmin next. Yasmin, oh no, sorry. We'll go to Melissa. I said Melissa, and then we're going to go to Yasmin. Yasmin, if you can pull two more questions for us, that would be great. Melissa, you're next. Go ahead. You have a question?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to first say that I'm very happy that this center is opening. I work in Cabbagetown, serving a lot of more complicated populations. And so this is really great news. I think my concern is I hear a lot of stigma and prejudice and assumptions around these youth that are going to be living there, that they're drug users and such. And also, I think of a misunderstanding of what harm reduction really is. And my concern is for the residents living at the shelter and how we can maybe better engage or educate our community so that they understand keywords and frameworks, and kind of remove the stigma that there is already on people that don't even live there yet. I'm wondering if there will be ongoing community engagement chats or gatherings or Q&As. And this might be something the provider takes over, not necessarily that the city has to do, but I'm just trying to, I guess, harm reduce the experience for these youth that are coming into our community. And a lot of people had great ideas on how to support them, but I'm wondering what we can do in terms of a proactive way. Because I have a child who's 12 and a child who's 20. Both are very excited as well for this to happen. One still goes to the school in the area. And so I've been able to have these conversations with him. And so the capacity is there. And I want to push our community and our neighbors to be able to understand a little bit better. So yeah, that's my
amazing.
question.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. While we're just chatting here, Daniel, can you bring back the slide that has the email address on it? So that if individuals who are on tonight or in the community want to help in some way, shape, or form, and they don't know what to do, just as a holding, just so that we have your name and number and contact, just go to 1615 Dufferin and Gmail and just write to us and say, I'd like to help in some way, shape, or form. Just put me on your list. And then we can put that together as we move forward with the operator.
Great.
I know our company does this for other sites all across the city, all across the province, and it is massive. It's amazing when a new operator comes in and they already have people in the community who want to help. So at the minimum, if you could just do that, and then we can follow up with you when we're a little closer. This is 2 years away, at least to open.
Mhm.
So it's important that we ramp up when the opportunity's there. Thank you very much for your comments.
I also asked a question in the Q&A you can disregard because it was the same one.
Okay, super. Yasmin, we're going to go to you next, and you've got a couple of questions for us.
Yes, I do. The first one is the St. Clair West community currently has 16 shelters and supports for vulnerable population. What do we need? Why do we need another one in this area?
Sorry, is the question 16 or 6?
16.
Okay, for first, let's make sure that we know actually that that's it. But the question is, why do we need another one?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go to Loretta on this question. Loretta, I think you actually have a map somewhere that shows how many are in the area, but or Loretta, you might know off the top of your head how many shelters are in the area.
I am drawing a blank at the moment. I might ask if Sue Hall knows this one off the top of his head.
Sue Hall, go ahead. You're muted.
Yeah, we can look up the number of shelters in the area, but I think the bigger question is why are we placing two shelters in a near each other? I think the reality is we need a lot more shelters. As Loretta said earlier in the presentation, we need 20 shelters across the city. So while these two seem close to each other, as we open more in Etobicoke and Scarborough, you'll see more throughout the rest of the city. It's important to recognize that we are a challenging time around homelessness. As Loretta mentioned earlier, there's 200 people calling in each night who aren't able to access shelter. And we have to move forward with any sites we find that meet the criteria as Allison outlined. So we can't, in an ideal world, we get to pick and choose exactly where shelters are, but the reality is it's very difficult to find sites that are suitable for shelters. And City Council has asked us to move forward as quickly as we can to addressing this very challenging problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Yasmin, let's go to one more. And I'm just going to ask our panel, we're getting close to time. We're supposed to go until 8:30. I'm just going to ask the panel if it's okay if we go 10 minutes over so that we can try and get to as many folks as possible. So we'll go to 8:40 if that's okay. So Yasmin, go ahead.
Another question is the current building being torn down and rebuilt or simply renovated?
Who would like to? Allison, go ahead.
I can answer that. Thanks, Yasmin. We are intending to convert the property. So to the extent possible, save as much of the existing footprint, but this is a conversion, not a new construction project.
Super, thank you. Quick question, quick answer. And Loretta, I saw your screen flash up. Did you want to jump in on that? No? Okay.
No, Allison answered it. It will be a renovation. The existing building will remain.
Super, thank you. Yasmin, do you have one more, or do you want me to go to the list?
Yeah, I do have another one. It's kind of a follow-up. Someone's asking, will the site design be open for discussion by the community?
Right, excellent. So actually in our confidential community survey, one of the questions we do ask is about the design and construction issues. So how much impact will the community have on design and construction? Loretta?
We're always open to feedback community may have. We're on a very tight timeline to have the site designed so that we can start construction. But key areas where we'd be interested in gaining community feedback, which you can send through the email accounts on the screen here, would be, maybe respect to color of the exterior cladding if we were to improve some of that work, which might be necessary through some of the net zero initiatives that we will be undertaking, possibly with some of the outdoor landscaping. In many cases with new shelter locations, we like to incorporate artwork. So open to any thoughts, suggestions, any local artists from the community here might have for those being sent our way.
Okay, thank you very much, Loretta. Thank you, Yasmin. We're going to go to Michael, Marco, and Margaret. That has great alliteration. Michael, Marco, and then Margaret, and then we're going to pause. And I think we may have to wrap at that point, depending on how long these go. Michael, I'm going to get you to open up your microphone. Michael, go ahead.
Oh, hey there. I've heard you guys talk a lot about community engagement, but not give any really specific examples of how this works in practice. And this recent snowstorm and the fact that I still can't push a stroller down some of the blocks in our neighborhood makes me really concerned about the responsiveness of the city and the ability of the city to respond to the needs of the neighborhood. Can you give examples from other shelters of how concerns have been raised and how they've been addressed, and actually specific examples rather than reading us the policies?
Okay, thank you very much for that. Sue Hall, do you want to jump in on that? Manager of Community Engagement, go ahead.
Thanks, Bruce. And maybe you could speak to this as well, because you were part of the opening of 731 Runnymede, which was a site that we opened with a lot of community opposition and challenges. Community members had a lot of concerns about the shelter program and the impact we'll have in the community. I think there was extensive feedback from the community around the need for a community space within that, the type of programming that should be there, and how to make this successful. Community members were on a community liaison committee providing feedback throughout the development of the site. But by the time we were actually ready to open, that community liaison committee became an embrace community where community members were, instead of focusing on the issue, were focusing on how to support the site, how to volunteer the site, how to bring food and clothing for the residents of the site. There was an open house at the event that was more of a celebration with the community members coming in and seeing the site, learning about the service. And I think we want something similar here where we can, while I understand that we have a lot of trust to earn with this community and there's a lot of apprehension about the service, that we can work with you on a continuous basis to get your feedback, make adjustments as necessary to improve what concerns around safety and feelings of and your concerns, and really try to create a foster a supportive environment for the site so that you can be successful in this neighborhood, in the shelter. I don't know if Bruce, you want to add anything to that?
Sure, happy to jump in because we do a lot of this community engagement across the city and across the province, actually. There's typically two approaches, and they can run parallel or separately. One is that community liaison function, which Sue Hall has mentioned. That typically would be members of the community, a BIA rep, community residents association rep, different people sit on the committee. They might meet 2 or 3 times a year. And it's really a place where issues and opportunities are brought together with the operator, and the city will monitor it, but the operator really takes ownership of that community liaison process. And, if there are issues or irritants or some things that you want to know about coming up, that might be through the community liaison committee. And a separate track is what we call the embrace track. And that is really people in the community who want to come together, who want to actively work to make it a success. And the example that you gave, Sue Hall, was at Runnymede in St. Clair, and the Embrace Committee came out, and neighbors came out and actually genuinely wanted to help the operator. And they also work on things like care packages for new residents, or they'll do welcome packages, they'll do community events at the shelter. Now, keep in mind, the privacy of the shelter residents is paramount, and these are youth, so it may not operate exactly the same way as it would for an adult shelter. But those two tracks are very, very common. In addition, the operators normally would have 1 or 2 staff who are assigned to community engagement, who would actually be public facing and who would be out going to BIA meetings or going into residents association meetings, and who are proactively kind of outside the building working with the community. So I've seen this. This has been very, very good. A lot of them in Toronto are very good. If you need examples, you can just write to us and we'll give you some examples. So I love that question. Okay, because I love community engagement. Michael, thank you very much for that. Marco, Margaret, and then we're going to pause. Marco, you're next. Go ahead. Marco, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you. My question is more about budget. So one, I do just want to comment, and not on behalf of anyone else, but I reject the idea that anyone is against shelter for youth. What I find confusing is what sounds like the crippling amount of money that is coming from taxpayer dollars. For example, just in this one meeting, there are 5 of you on the call, each on salaries of 150, maybe 200,000 plus, times 10 of the shelters listed for this purpose. And if anyone's been in that building, the cost of, quote, renovating or retrofitting is also an enormous amount of money, especially when you guys are giving it a very rushed 2-year period, which means 5 times the amount of overtime from whatever contract people are hired for it. I would like someone to address who brought up the idea of why not, if it must stay in the downtown core, why were not all of these vacant commercial buildings considered that don't need that much retrofitting, that already have washrooms, kitchens, and how much is the staff that you call this wraparound service care for each of these locations going to be per year annually? Thank you.
Okay, so 2 angles on that. One, and maybe, I'm not sure, Loretta or Lorraine, if you want to jump in. What is the cost of this? The operating cost, but also, as Marco described, the cost of this particular capital project. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start with the cost of the capital project, which is over a 10-year period. The council approved capital project is $674 million. That includes all costs related to the creation of the 20 new shelter sites over the next 10 years. It takes into account any staffing salaries, inflation, as well as the purchase price of sites, the design, the cost of consultants, engineers, design teams, the general contractors, Bruce's team here, Public Progress, all of this to ensure that the site is successful over the course of the next 10 years. We have a number of staff people here because we know there's a lot of interest in this project and in this site, and we want to make sure you, as the taxpayers and the ones local to this community, are getting the right answers you need as quickly as you are looking for them, rather than us having to take many of these questions away to find someone who can possibly give the right answer and then come back to you with the answer. And that's why we have a team here. I see Sue Hall's camera is up, so you might want to add.
Sue Hall, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to quickly touch on the operating expense. That was a big part of the original rationale for opening these sites. The reality was that since the city wasn't investing in shelters at that time, we were stuck leasing very expensive hotels, and those were costing us twice as much as our base shelter system was costing. So it was around $253 per night per person for the hotels, compared to $126 per person per night within our regular shelter hotels. So the argument was made that if we invested in purpose-built site, while there will be initial expense to it, over the long term, the city will save significant amounts of money and also be allowed to create spaces that are more purpose-built to the needs of the population we are trying to serve. And also, there will be more stability in that service. With hotels or another facility from the private market, we're relying on lease agreements and continuing rising costs. And to the youth at the site or the operator don't know if that program will be the next year, whether another lease will be continuing. So that's why it was important for us to enter into agreements in permanent sites that can be custom built, that over the long term will save the city significant amounts of money.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We're going to go to Margaret, and I think we can squeeze in one more. So Margaret and then Dina or Dinah. Margaret, I'm just going to open up your microphone. Go ahead, Margaret. And then after Margaret, we'll go to Dinah. Margaret, go ahead. Margaret. Okay, maybe I'm just going to pause you there for a second, and let's go to Dinah. Dinah? Dinah, go ahead. You had a question.
Yes. Hi. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much for having this engagement session. I am a resident in the area as well, and I wanted to again echo my support both for the existence of the shelter in the community, but also for the location. I have a 3-year-old that goes to a daycare just down the street. I'm extremely supportive of the shelter being right beside a library, which is a service that the youth would probably want to use, that it's beside schools, which is again a service that the youth would probably want to use. I guess I didn't really have so much a question as a suggestion within community engagement. As someone with small kids, I have a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old at the moment. Would just like to suggest and to ask that the engagement include those of us in the neighborhood with young kids and provide opportunities, if not necessarily for childcare, then at least for, timing that would be appropriate so that those of us with small kids could attend as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Excellent suggestion. And I know we try to do some in-person sessions and some online sessions. We're going to have to bring this session to a close. Before we do, there are a couple of things that we want to touch on. And this slide that's up on the screen, if you haven't yet had a chance to ask your question, you can please send it to us and we'll do our best to answer or to get the right staff person to answer. In addition, we have about 100 questions in the email or in the question box. We will do our best to consolidate. Some of them are, super political, and it's hard for, we're trying to get the questions about the shelter directly answered. So we will try and put that together in a little Q&A and post that. That might take us a little bit of time because, as I said, it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's about 100 questions in there. We'll do our best. I do want to go to Councillor Bravo. We're getting close to the end. And Councillor Bravo, you've been listening in on your community members. and I know you've been studiously making notes. And I'm just wondering if you want to take a few minutes to comment.
Yeah, well, thank you, Bruce. Thank you to everyone that's participated generously with your time, all the residents, and Bruce for your good facilitation. First, I think it's important for Toronto Shelter Services and Supports to be prepared to answer the question about the number of shelters in Davenport. Information shared with my office is that there are 5 emergency shelters of this type, not 16. And that 4 out of the 5 are south of Dupont. So that kind of information is really important to have on hand in a meeting like this. I hear a community interest in working with a qualified operator, the selected operator. I will work to make sure that there is a space for this dialogue in a meaningful way once that operator is known. But also I think there's an opportunity now to collect all of this information and share this as sort of the kind of, this is your remit, this is your job, these are the things that you have to make sure are addressed, and so that we ensure community concerns are heard and addressed early. And I also hear community members and organizations in Davenport that want to get involved in supporting the shelter residents to get connected, to welcome and to help these young people have the best possible outcomes and opportunities. Many questions about drug use. I think we need more information about how this will work in a youth shelter and how community impacts will be minimized. More specifics about how the good neighbor policy works, and more clarity about the processes available to neighbors. It came out in the questions and in some of the comments that you made, Bruce. I think we eventually got there, but I think it's helpful to kind of tell the story from the perspective of the neighborhood as well, not just the policies. And I think one person made that comment, tell us a story, illustrate. That's what people are saying. We need more examples of the shelters that work, why they work, and how can we ensure that this one will work in that way. And that did come out eventually in the questions, but that was a lot of what I heard. And in terms of concerns, the information about the transactions, et cetera, these are all public processes, and there's rigorous oversight when it comes to municipal finance. So I think those questions were answered well. I'd say that the loss of medical services is an important pain that people are experiencing. We have lots of development proposals coming into the area, and I think it's important that the new projects, the developers understand that this is a service that we need in our community, and they provide that space, office space for medical services. And I just want to conclude by saying that we will hold an in-person meeting in our office. We will kind of dig deeper into what people where they're coming from. It won't happen immediately because some more information is going to be coming out. And we need to get ready for that. And I really appreciate the comment at the end that that we make it an opportunity where people can attend with their kids because they are part of the community. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide my 2 cents here, but we've been carefully listening and taking notes in my office. Thanks.
Councillor, thank you. It sounds to me like you need some tea with honey. You need some tea with honey. Thank you very much for those comments. Let me just take a minute to thank our panel. Loretta Ramadan, Director of Infrastructure Planning and Development for the city's Shelter and Support Services Division. Allison Folasea, I got that right, Director of Transaction Services for the city's Corporate Real Estate Management Division. Lorraine Clark, Manager, Operations and Support Services with Shelter and Support Services. Lorraine, thank you for helping us to understand how these operate. And Suhal Ahmed, Manager of Planning and Engagement with the Infrastructure Planning team. Thank you also to my colleague, Yasmin Youssef, for going through those questions and helping us to pull this together. And Daniel, thank you for your technical support at the back end and running the slides. Folks, if you have any questions, if we haven't been able to get to them tonight, you can always write to us at 1615dufferin@gmail.com, or you can visit the city's website at toronto.ca/1615dufferin. Tonight's presentation will appear on that site, and the slides will appear on that site in the coming days. Let me thank everyone for participating in tonight's session. I think we had about 150 people participating, which was fantastic. And we look forward to your continued involvement. Good night.